Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started today. So today I just wanted to kind of introduce to everyone the Okagawa W1 spinning confocal that we're going to be getting, setting up probably the end of this week, and we're going to start on Monday and have basically 2 weeks to demo the microscope system, and just to tell you kind of what this is, what it's best to do, and then take any questions that people have about what they can do with it. So. And actually, this is an image that was zebrafish that was done by Daniel Castronova, taken on a W1. So it's kind of an example of some of the beauty you can get from this thing. So this is the beast we're going to be working with here. This is a standard Nikon TI2 inverted microscope, and this is the W1 scan head that we're going to be testing out. So many of you know about confocal imaging, so it's kind of a tried and true. So the point scanning confocal, it has better axial and lateral resolution than wide field imaging because you basically have the ability to focus a laser beam off of a set of scanning mirrors through an objective lens, and it's focused into a point in your imaging plane, and then only photons that originate from your imaging plane go back up through a pinhole, and by rejecting the autofocus light, this improves the axial resolution and also the signal to noise ratio because you're getting rid of a lot of the out of field fluorescence. So this is kind of the basics of the standard point scanning confocal, which has been around for 30 years now, 40 years almost. So the problem with this is that it actually does have some sacrifices as far as the sensitivity and the speed when you're talking about point scanning confocals. So the spinning disc confocal is a different way of doing the confocal in that you still have the pinholes, but in this case, what you do is you spread the laser beam instead of having it focused into a point. You spread it, and then you put it through what's called a Nikon disc, where it has micro lenses that basically take the light and project it through. It then goes through a dichromatic mirror, and then it's focused through an objective into the specimen, but instead of one point, it's hundreds or thousands of points. And then basically the second Nikon disc actually has the pinhole array, which actually is used the same as the static, the adjustable pinhole in a spinning disc, the standard confocal, to reject the out of field light. And then we can record the images onto a CCD, or in our case, we're using CMOS cameras. And just because this is, we're basically illuminating the entire field all at once, and we're breaking the laser beam into many, many points, it's a lot gentler and it's faster. So again, the advantage of the spinning disc. So again, it's much faster, so we can easily go at tens of frames per second or more than that even, compared to like the 1/2 to 4 frames per second we get out of a standard point scanning confocal. And that's because if you think about a galvano scanning, you basically have to raster across all of the field with a single laser point, whereas a spinning disc is basically you're imaging the entire, basically illuminating the entire specimen the entire time. So it's more of a field scanner than a point scanner. So this also makes the spin disc a lot gentler for imaging sensitive processes. So if anyone's watched our shot to size talks, so all of their imaging is done in the very early embryo, which is very light sensitive, and they do everything with the spinning disc because again, that gentler imaging is just much better for those processes. The spinning discs are also have a lot more sensitive detectors. So the cameras that we're going to be using are 95% quantum efficient. So that means basically 95% of the time you're able to convert a photon into electron, whereas even the best gas detectors on point scanners are only about 45% quantum efficient, right? So we're already losing 50% of our light from a confocal because of the kind of suboptimal detectors that we use with point scanners. So this is a conventional point spinning disc confocal, which we have in the NIC. This is the CSU X1. This is kind of the evolutionary version of their first scanning mode. But the issue with the X1 is it has a very small field of view, right? So it's 10 millimeters by 7 millimeter field of view. It's really nice. It does, the signal to noise is great. The confocality is wonderful. It's well matched for high NA objectives. And gives us great images, and it can go very, very fast. But the W1, its benefit is that basically it further expands the laser light to go through a larger area, and it has pinholes that are more spaced out, and this actually gives us a bigger field of view. So now we basically have 4 times the imaging area with the W1. So it's 17 by 16 millimeters. So you get a lot more out of every image that you take with the W1. So again, bigger area gives us a lot of advantages for a lot of things. So if you're looking at the example here on the left, so you've got neurons, so a field of neurons. So this is what you would be seeing in the X1, whereas this is actually what you see in the W1. And so in cases of biology where context is very important for what you're trying to image or understand, the W1 field of view is really excellent. Also, if you're trying to do something in any kind of high content imaging, the X1 is really not going to be a great instrument for you, because if you're trying to do things like cell counting, you can see how many more cells you can count per shot with the W1 compared to the X1. So this is a huge benefit for anything where you can automate a count or anything like that. The W1 is definitely going to give you a lot of advantages. The W1 disc itself is also a lot better for thick specimens. So the X1 is great for like single cells grown flat in culture. They don't have a lot of axial resolution. So the pinholes, when the pinholes are very tightly spaced, they're still very good at rejecting the out-of-field fluorescence because it's not actually coming from a lot of different focal planes. However, if you have a thick specimen on the X1, you actually do have the potential for things which are out of the field of focus to actually make it through and go and do what's called pinhole crosstalk. They actually will bleed into adjacent pinholes. So what the W1 does is actually has bigger spacing, and so this allows you to image deeper into tissue, and so it makes the W1 a lot better for those kinds of experiments, although it still does work very, very well on single cells grown in culture. The W1 also has two different pinhole sizes. One is better for the high mag objectives, so the 50 micron here. This actually works very well for the 100x and the 60x objectives, but to get the same kind of contrast, same kind of confocality with a low mag objective like this 20x, there's a second pinhole disk size, pinhole size in the disk, which is the 25 micron. And you can see there's a lot better contrast using the smaller pinhole compared to this. So you need a smaller pinhole to achieve the same kind of confocality when you move down to a smaller objective, a smaller mag objective. Also, in addition to the changes in the disk itself, so with this system that we're getting in, it has the ability to do what's called staging up. So we actually have, instead of just a one layer of filtered cubes, we can actually have a second layer on top. And so in this case, our lower layer is going to be, we're just going to be using for epifluorescence, and our upper layer, we're going to actually install a point scanning device so we can do photo bleaching and photo stimulation using that. And this basically just gives us multiple variable light paths. And so in the future, if we wanted to add on anything else to this system, we have a lot of flexibility built in that we can essentially, in this case, they're showing two different turf arms, a DMD device, and a storm module, all together with fluorescence. So we can put up to 5 different devices on the back of one microscope.